Seriously, they used to throw dwarves in France.
Well,
Yeah, but they're French.
Yeah, yeah.
But you say everything you say.
Sorry?
What do you
Down the hill.
Do you not know what dwarf tossing is?
No. Like ball.
Okay, dwarf tossing is where you hold the dwarf by their legs, and then you spin, and then you launch. And it's whoever can throw the dwarf the furthest wins. It's a serious sport.
Serious sports.
This is a serious sport.
And it was replaced.
Real life human dwarves. Yes. None of you have ever heard, like, then they instigated, then they had to wear helmets. But initially they wouldn't. The dwarf would do this of their own volition and they would be paid. The dwarves became very famous. This was a part of French culture. It still exists in the United States. Yeah. Yeah. But you throw them.
You open the room for feminism, but not for dwarf?
Yeah. I personally am of the view that dwarves should not be tossed. But it does exist in the real world. Fine.
Wait,
So we've got the countries where it's part of the culture.
Oh.
How did you know I needed water? I'm absolutely dying. I'm absolutely dying for water.
But everything you're saying is basically it's a derivative of the fact that I have to know this stuff. I never. Right now, you just told us it's a cultural thing in France.
You don't need to
I don't know
that.
about it.
But to be honest, you don't. If none of the teams knew that, all you need to know is should it be legal to throw dwarves?
Yeah, but
Like that's,
yeah, but when you want to give an example and you go like, well, the example is I've got nothing.
no, you don't need to. You could say, look. At the moment, a lot of people out there want to throw small people. And a lot of small people are unable to gain employment in any other way. So why not allow these two groups to carry out their will? Right?
Sounds just like
Cannibalism?
It sounds like any other debate, right? But this one is slightly different because an individual dwarf can ask to be thrown, but in so doing might damage the way in which whole of society views dwarves. And so other dwarves, should they be allowed to stop that one dwarf from saying yes? So we know we have that. So that's why I've got dwarves as separate. So what I'm looking for here, though, are all of the groups or individuals that are affected by something. Now, just to start on a more general level. So here, I think that's about it. So,
How do you call it?
stakeholder.
Stakeholder.
Stakeholder. So to hold a stake. S-T-A-K-E, not like an eating steak. So this is, and think of this on a line, right? At the moment I've got this line in the wrong order, but you start right from the top and you go right to the bottom. Up here you've got everyone, everything. So the earth, the universe, and down here you've got the individual. In between you've got the family, which will come up in a lot of debates. Above the family, you've perhaps got the community, the local level. That'll come up in subsidiarity debates. Above that, you've perhaps got, in some debates, you might talk about the municipality, potentially. Above that, you've got companies, multinational corporations. Above that, you've got the legal system. Above that, you've got the government. Above that, you've got the state. Above that, you've got the European Union and other supranational groups. Above that, you've got the United Nations, and then finally you get to everything, right? The individual can also be lots of different types of individuals, and above the community can be a lot of different types of communities. It can be women as a community. It can be gays as a community. It can be dwarves as a community. The point is, a stakeholder analysis asks this question: who is being affected by this debate? Can I abuse that particular stakeholder to get some arguments? That's all. That's all you're asking. So, as the top half is like ticking through all of your arguments, and you are getting a little bit panicky, or if you simply don't know what's going on in the debate, you don't know what it's about, ask, all right, just mind game. If I say to you, tossing of dwarves, unfortunately now you know it's a sport. I wish you didn't know it was a sport. Could you have still come up with the majority of the arguments? It's quite likely that you could have done. And then the same rules apply to this, or to finding new arguments. Like, completely substantively new arguments are often derived from this stakeholder analysis. The moment you work out that a group is affected by this motion, positively or negatively, you have come up with an argument. Okay? That's one way. That's the stakeholder analysis. The other way of doing this is a time analysis. What is going to happen in the short term might have been debated loads. So, they have talked about Turkey entering the EU, and they've talked about in 10 years. We want to talk about the European Union in 50 years. We want to talk about demographics. We want to talk about demographic change. We also want to talk about how cultures change over time, because proposition talk in the immediate short term about the clash of civilizations that will occur. We're going to talk to you about how over time communities can come together, and we're going to give you examples of that, looking at community policing in the United Kingdom and looking at black civil rights in the United States of America. Okay, I just jumped 50 years into the future and did my analysis there. I did that by using examples of today and looking at the past. I can't just go, look, in 50 years' time, we all know there are going to be flying cars, and so I'm going to run the flying car extension. Right? You can't do that. But what you can do is make realistic assumptions about what is likely to happen 50 years in the future, or 30 years in the future, or 20 years in the future, based on my understanding of what's happened in the past, and 20, 30, 50-year periods as they occurred then. So, you've got your who's affected, you've got your when is it affected. That's your other one. To be honest, all of the other questions are going to be fairly obvious to you. How, why. So how is practicalities. So you just ask yourself, what are all of the practicalities in this? How is this going to actually impact on the real world? How is this going to play out? So, if I allow dwarves to be tossed, what type of world will that be? How is that going to impact on the world? If I ask myself that question, the top half is engaging in all kinds of crap, right? If I ask myself, how does that affect the world, I'm suddenly going to start thinking about a world in which, yeah, kids are watching small human beings being thrown by bigger human beings. That is going to impact on their psyche, no matter whether there is volition there or not. It's going to be a world in which, potentially, I stop a dwarf from being thrown, yet I don't stop a man from working in dangerous conditions on a building site, if I'm on the other side of the debate. So that's why you ask, how is this going to impact? Go through the game of asking, what's going to happen if this were to change? And then obviously you ask, why? You ask, why would anyone do this? Why would anyone throw a dwarf? What would be their reasons for doing that? Or, why would anyone stop someone from throwing a dwarf? What would be their reasons for doing it? And so you then try to get into the minds of the lawyers, the politicians, the people who throw or are thrown. If you ask those questions, what you are trying to do is come up with different levels of analysis. By levels of analysis, I'm sort of talking about this. These are different levels of analysis. I can either analyse at the individual level, or the community level, or let's say the state level. So that's at a different level of analysis. But I'm also trying to engage in a level of analysis which tries to get into the minds of decision makers, the actors involved. Decision makers might be Fiji. So why would Fiji want this to happen? Why would Fiji be really angry if this happened? I don't need to know about Fiji to know that some people will be frustrated when Australians come with their guns and their tanks and their bombs and give me democracy. Alternatively, I might be ecstatic that my democratic rights have finally been returned by the only power that could reasonably do it, because no one else was going to. Are there any questions at this point before, again, I move on? Incidentally, what's the time?
5:15.